It would be really cool if we just relax and don't worry about whether we're right or wrong today. Because frankly, if I can't ask you a question which illustrates something in your mind that you've got wrong, then I'm not really helping you learn anything. You knew it already, didn't you? And I'm hoping to do that with everybody, so you can try and pretend I'm not doing it, and like we do in our life, pretending we're perfect and all this sort of stuff. Or we can open up and try and be curious. One of the things you'll find is that humility is always associated with genius. There's not a genius in the world I've ever studied who didn't have massive humility. And part of the reason for that is because the more you know, the more you don't know. One of the things I do in my emotional intelligence workshops, in the prep, I ask people to evaluate their level of self-awareness. So you could do this now, actually. You could just quickly make up your mind, what's your current level of self-awareness out of 10? You've probably done that already. And then maybe later in the day we can check back in on it and see what you think. Because I do this, I come back to it later in the workshop, later on, and people score themselves lower. The thing you've done without realising is you've had to decide what 10 looks like to score yourself. So when you open up to possibility and you realise your potential, which is far more than you're currently aware of, almost for certain. Sir Isaac Newton, who was considered to potentially be the greatest mathematical genius who has ever lived, just before he died he said, "I don't know how others may see me, but as I look at myself and reflect on my life, I seem little more than a small child walking along the beach, occasionally bending over to pick up a more interesting pebble or shell than normal, whilst all along the ocean of truth lay all around me." You can look at tactics, and tactics, there's lots and lots of tactics, and you could go the way with a couple of tactics, but it's much more helpful for you to understand the dynamics, the psychology of it, because then you can look at what you're doing against that all-encompassing umbrella. Differing opinions are one of the most interesting things for me, as long as you're not getting involved in the opinion being the person, and you make the person wrong because of their opinion, right? We've all got opinions, and that's all they are. And it's about trying to see, well, what opinion serves me best here, going beyond right and wrong. It's like, because I always say to my clients, stop, it's good, bad stuff, you know. It doesn't really help me to do good, bad, because it sets up positive, negatives, and Judith was talking about this. The way, whether we're thinking positively or negatively is massive. Neuroscience absolutely proves our brains work best when we're positive, when we're feeling good. There's no question about that.
What about charisma and power? I mean, we talked about that at a previous session, didn't we?
Yeah.
Do you think that charisma is important in a leader?
What is charisma?
Good question. How?
See, I'd certainly pick out personal engagement in that region. Is you need to be able to engage on a personal level with the people that you're leading. Whether you need to stand up in front of a big auditorium and whip up a frenzy of... I don't know, there's a few people that can do that, aren't there?
Yeah, and I don't know what charisma is, but I'm thinking Steve Jobs was charismatic and Tim Cook isn't, you know? But they probably both got very good leadership skills.
Well, one of the most important capabilities of a leader is being able to sell the vision.
Yeah.
So if that charisma helps you sell a vision, then great. The power piece, power is a little bit more, well, let's say less understood, because a lot of people associate power with position. In Mandela, if you look at what happened and what transformed his leadership, he went into prison as a globally seen as a terrorist, and he came out as a peacemaker. And what changed in those 27 years was an internal state, an internal orientation towards other people, wasn't it? He went from hating his enemy, wanting to kill them, to recognising them as human beings and wanting to understand them. And that is true transformation. Here's the paradox. Humility actually can't talk about itself. As soon as someone is trying to own humility, that's not humility, because they're trying to get significance out of the humility. And humility doesn't try to get significance, you see. So as soon as someone's claiming humility, welcome to my humble abode. Sorry, that's not humble. So can we train it? Well, yes, and I'm going to show you how later, briefly. But the key thing you need to know is that because it can't be instructed, it has to be constructed. It can't be taught from the outside in, it has to be uncovered from the inside out. Looking at the level of behaviours is not it. We have to start to talk about creating shifts in the culture and the climate of the business. So if you're not doing something that engages at the emotional level, you're wasting your time. And that's why studies show, right with you, studies show that over 90% of training courses don't deliver because they're aimed at the wrong part of the brain. When you were very little, you used to ask for what you wanted, and you'd ask and ask and ask, and you'd ask nicely over and over again, and at some point you realised this isn't working. Usually in about age 2 you started doing another strategy, which was to get angry. And most adults still use that strategy to get what they want. And the fact is that they're only doing it because they don't know how to get what they want being nice. If you knew how to get what you want to being nice, what would you do the anger thing for? Or the withdrawal thing, or the even lower state, which is victimhood? We wouldn't do it, would you? Is that emotional intelligence is about the ability to become aware of your own emotions and those of other people, to be able to manage your emotions and to be able to motivate or inspire other people to feel different as well. It's the way that there's lots of ways of expressing that, but that's what they're talking about. The problem I have with that is it's not wrong or anything, it's all neocortical, it's all thinking. And then you can read it and go, yeah, I understand that. It doesn't impact into behaviours. So what I've done, and this is all covered in your handout, towards the back of your handouts, is looked at, well, okay, so if we're looking at emotionally intelligent behaviours, what characteristics do they have? And all characteristics of mindset. And I've basically identified 3 that I think are critical. They're adaptive, appropriate, and responsive. So that's the thing about buying my first BMW. I'm a bit of a BMW person. I wanted a BMW back in, I suppose it was probably in the early 80s, that kind of thing. And there was a choice of 3. So we're seeing this massive explosion of choice, every colour, every flavour, every texture. We're seeing things accelerating, and the pace of change is getting faster and faster. We genuinely have a global economy now, which didn't exist 20 years ago. So if you want to stay with the times, you've got to be constantly developing yourself. So maybe ask yourself the question right now, how much of your time and effort do you put into learning and developing? How much of your time and effort have you put into creating a mindset that maximises your ability to learn and grow? The control perspective says things aren't working, I must exert more control. The learning perspective says things aren't working, I need to let go. Which feels more comfortable to most leaders?
First one.
The first one. All leaders operate this way. And yet what he found was it's ineffective. And that what actually works is the other. Accenture did a study a few years ago where they looked at successful companies and they discovered their internal attitude was utterly different to most others. Most companies are looking at their competition, saying, how do I compete with you? And most successful companies aren't really interested in the competition except as information about how they're doing. They're actually constantly looking internally and saying, how do we do better than we did last year? But this is what I teach in my emotional intelligence workshops, and this is what I teach in my decision-making workshops, handling ambiguity. And it creates transformational leaders, because what we have down here, low level of responsiveness, high reactivity means doing what we've always done, okay? In an environment with low levels of complexity, it's fine if that's your business, right? It creates transactional, project-based type relationships, and it works in that environment. If you try and use that approach in an environment which is faster moving, it doesn't work. If you try and use it in an environment where more responsiveness is needed, it doesn't work. This is hyperactivity. It means like I'm going to be overactive. I'm going to be doing too much. Sorry, underactive. Here I'll be taking too much action because I'm not stopping to think about what's necessary in this environment. And what we essentially need up here is a transformational leader, someone who leads with relationships, and the projects come off the back of that. People who lose their emotional centres of the brain, maybe from a stroke or a road accident, they lose the ability to decide what colour socks to put on in the morning, which side of the bed to get out of. Shall I clean my teeth or wash my face first? Environment is hostile to one that says environment is friendly. Why would that be the most important question we can ever answer? By the way, it's not a question we constantly answer, but it's an internal worldview we have all the time. To what degree do I see threats down here or opportunity up here? And it's not something we stop and think about. It's when something happens outside our comfort zone, what's our immediate stance towards it? Do I welcome it because this is going to be good for me? So here I align, and here I'm antagonised. If you walk past one of your staff without acknowledging them, that is more negative for a human being than criticising them. How do we know? Because you can see it in children. Because children will choose to be punished rather than ignored, won't they? They'll misbehave to get your attention. And one of the fastest things you can do to feel better, and this is psychologically proven, is to help someone else. If you want to feel better, go out and help someone else. And then you'll feel better. It's one of the fastest ways. There's actually only two things that create true fulfillment. One is when we personally grow. So most of what I've been talking to you about this morning, you will feel better if you get on this. Because when we experience greater personal expression, we get true fulfillment.